Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and this time we're talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and what kind of DLC we're going to be seeing for Wave 4. If you didn't know, Wave 4, the very last of the DLC that will be coming to the expansion pass for this game, is going to be new original story content. There's going to be a story scenario that we're going to be given for this DLC towards the end of next year. But what kind of content will that be? What exactly are we getting? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Now before we jump into things, let me first very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or perhaps consider joining as a member. So in order to give the best possible prediction for what this DLC will end up being, I think we should look at the past. And the best closest example to what we're looking at here for Wave 4 of the expansion pass is what we got towards the end of the expansion pass for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which also was a new story-based scenario. We got Torna The Golden Country, and that was a pretty significant DLC. It was so significant, there was even a separate physical release for this DLC. You could buy it as its own game. That's how big of a deal this DLC was. It was basically its own RPG adventure that can last you somewhere between 20 and 40 hours. Something substantial, not as big as a full-on Xenoblade game, but maybe something closer to about a third or half the length, which is substantial. So that's the precedent that's been set on the Nintendo Switch for the Xenoblade series and its expansion pass. So I think we should probably expect something similar for Wave 4 for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It honestly makes a lot of sense. Since the game is already built, the engine's already there, the assets are already there, it's a lot easier to go ahead and build a little bit more content after just about a year of the game being out, and they could release it later into next year, and they could even give it a physical release. This will boost Nintendo's lineup, it will increase the profit margins for the Xenoblade 3 project. It's a great idea from a business perspective. And it's also going to be great quality content, where we love Xenoblade, and another Xenoblade adventure, I think, is something that most fans are going to be very happy to see. But what kind of adventure are we looking at here? Is it going to be another prequel story like Torna The Golden Country? Torna The Golden Country is a country that was demolished before the events of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and we got to see what happened then and how those events led to the beginning of Xenoblade 2. Are we going to see something similar for 3? If that's the case, playing through 3, something that comes to mind to me is the whole story we saw in the town with the statues and the heroes, or rather, the original Ouroboros. Could we be seeing what happened to them and how they built up the town and the initial conflict they had with Mobius? That could definitely be happening. But that's not what I'm predicting. I think something different is going to occur. An epilogue story, something similar to the epilogue story we saw for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Future Connected. So with that in mind, there's already a little bit of a precedent for this happening. Even though there wasn't a separate release, and even though it wasn't DLC, since Definitive Edition was basically a remastering of an original game, they added extra content there. They added a whole other little mini adventure. It wasn't as big as Torna The Golden Country, but it was still substantial. It was something you could put in 15 to 20 hours into easily. Now, I'm not suggesting that this DLC be shorter than Torna The Golden Country and something closer to Future Connected, but in terms of there being an epilogue story, we've seen Monolith Soft do this before for the Xenoblade series during the Switch era. So I think it's something that's also on the cards. And now that I've finished Xenoblade 3, I will be discussing spoilers now, so you've been warned. I think this makes the most sense for where the story is headed. Yes, there'd be some value to doing a prologue story, but unlike with Xenoblade 2, we already got a flashback to different characters in the past, so it isn't like the past isn't explored at all in 3. We have a pretty good understanding of what happened. There isn't too much mystery there, but what there is more of a mystery of is what happens afterwards. Because you see what happens at the end of 3. Our party of 6 are split. The two worlds that converged at the beginning of the game have now separated once again and are going to their own separate realms. Our friends are separated. The 3 on each side from the 2 different factions are going to be living their own lives in separate parallel universes. But the cast multiple times made references to visiting each other and seeing each other again. Even with that final little journal entry from Mio, she talks about how this is not the end and she will see them again. It's mentioned multiple times. Mio even swears on it. It's a promise. So to me, if anything, that feels more like a story hint as to what's to come for the DLC. It could perhaps be a hint towards Xenoblade 4, but typically with the different Xenoblade games, they take place in entirely different eras or universes. So while there may be a connection between this Xenoblade game and the next one, it's likely not to be starring the same exact characters. What we're seeing here is suggesting something more of a continuation with the current cast. And considering what they did with the epilogue story in Future Connected, where some of the current cast continued onward for a little bit more of an adventure, I think we're going to be getting something like that for the DLC. That's what makes the most sense to me. That's where the mystery is at. Will they reconvene? Will we see them again? They had this huge love story. There's so much questions as to about, will they come back together again? I think this is how they will ultimately finish out and conclude Xenoblade 3 with this epilogue story. There's a little bit more there. So that's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting that Wave 4 for the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 expansion pass will be an epilogue story taking place shortly after the events of 3. Maybe even a couple years. That's also possible given that we do see Noah go back to being a kid at the very beginning, but they will find their ways back to each other again. They will regain their full memories of each other, and I think that's how they're going to conclude this world. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.